So the question, of course, is how does one cope with storage issues in a small house when one is an absolutely mad collector on a budget? Well, of course, the answer is the really useful box. Where would we be without the really useful box? They first appeared some 10, 12 years ago, maybe a bit longer. And then all of a sudden there were loads of imitators everywhere, which had strange bumps and things inside. The great thing about the really useful box, of course, is it doesn't have any of that. You know, it's nice and simple. You can get them everywhere. They're cheap. They come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. So I got this one, and it's just because there's a tiny space under the bed. So I'm going to pop something under there, and I'm not sure what as yet. So I'm thinking horror in this one, mostly A format, so I may be able to get something else in there, but I've got a couple of pesky sort of, that's a B format, the Adam Neville, and this is one of the British Library things, which is a weird, it's not exactly a B, it's as wide as a B, but it's not as tall as one, which is really irritating. I hate irregular formats, so I'll probably do that. So there's a bit of space down the side there, you know, we'll see about that, but you know, I can always pop something else in at a later date. What this is going to enable me to do is to put some more of my anthologies together in the corner, so that's great. So that's a start. Sort of like a bookseller abhors a vacuum, really, and I really want to put something else in there, but I'm not sure what. So, but it just seems like a wasted space, but something will turn up, so I'll get rid of that for now, and that will go under the bed. Haha. There's a little more we can do here. A couple of A format anthologies at the top there. And let's see, these are sort of some key new wave ones, and you know, maybe this will become part of an anthologies video, maybe not. That's a bit tight, I don't like that. There's a copy of SF Impulse. I must get some more of those at some point. That'll do for now. So that's created a bit more space a bit lower down for, yeah, as you see, there's a bit of space there now, and next shelf. So we've actually created a bit of space there. We can get that one in there. So it's coming together. That means I've got all this glorious space there. Isn't that amazing? It's huge, isn't it? I can possibly fit about 6 or 7 A format anthologies in there. So that's ready for my next pickups on that front. It reminds me of that story by J.G. Ballard, The Enormous Space, and it was filmed as Home with Anthony Sher on the BBC, but a guy who kind of moves into his attic, and it seems to be getting much bigger to him, but of course it isn't. Great story. Let's have a look at a few of these anthologies, which I've just sort of tidied up, and there's some pictures that I took at the Worldcon with like an ancient Instamatic about 1 million years ago. There's Michael Moorcock doing a sign. Look at that. Gosh, that takes me back. Even then, that camera was like as old as the hills, older than most of them, in fact. So we'll just try something else. So what I wanted to show you is some of the more unusual anthologies that I have here. Some of the hard covers. This is Aries 1. This is published by David and Charles, who are like the last publisher you'd imagine doing any SF, and they didn't really do fiction. They're more sort of like a product publisher, doing things like gardening, that sort of stuff. And the funny thing is, at this point, which is the late 70s, D&C, David and Charles, owned the Science Fiction Book Club, I believe. And this came out in 79, and I think this cost me about 10 quid on eBay a few years ago. And I did have the Science Fiction Book Club edition, which you could pick up fairly easily. This is harder to get, and I really like this. It's a lovely anthology. It's edited by John Grant, who with John Clute edited the Encyclopedia of Fantasy, which is the last word on the subject, as I've said many times. And there's some great stuff in here, actually. And funnily enough, the main reason I bought this, there's a story in here which I was trying to find a while ago when I showed you the David Redd collection, David Redd, the Welsh SF writer. And I was sure it was called On the Deck of the Flying Bomb, but it's not. That's one of his own stories, I think. But there is one in here by Priest and Redd called The Agent, and this is the one I was thinking of. There's also a Colin Wilson SF story in here called Time Slip, which is written like an autobiographical piece, and Wilson is the narrator and the character in it, which is quite interesting. It's not a major story, but there's some good stuff in this. It's got In the Valley of the Statues by Robert Holdstock. It's got a Bob Shaw collaboration with somebody called Malcolm Harris. It's got Gary Kilworth in here, who I really like, especially in his early days. And yeah, there's some good stuff in this. So this is really nice. So it's a kind of blast from the time when, you know, everybody did a bit of SF, which is really good. So what else do we have? Well, I read this the other day, Voices from the Radium Age, and this is the current Radium Age series. There was a different one a few years ago, and some of them being recycled. It's in MIT with these Seth covers. And I have been buying all of these, but I'm divided on whether they're actually any good or not. And let me just see, I've got a PC on in front of me. I was going to turn it off a minute because it's probably washing out my face because I'm doing this on the new camera, so we'll see if it comes out any good or whether I've got a lot more, you know, videos to watch to help me do it. But yeah, I read this the other day and it's got some real classic stuff in it, stuff I've read before several times, like for example The Machine Stops by M. Forster, which is really good. You can get a little penguin of that, which is really nice. It's smaller than A format, and of course it's only a short story. And there's also Horror of the Heights by Conan Doyle. Conan Doyle's SF is fantastic. There's not much of it, of course, and it's quite sort of horror story. A really good one. But there's some really minor stuff in here. There's a certain amount of virtue signalling in these, and they're always talking up the authors from ethnic minorities or the female authors, and there's a certain amount of that. And, you know, it is important to be inclusive and show that it wasn't only just white guys writing SF, there were other examples. And there's some interesting ones in here, but they're fairly minor. But then again, a lot of stuff from this period I think is fairly minor, just as it was in the Gernsbacher magazine. So I think really the stuff in here which is the best is the stuff I already knew and already read. The obscurities are obscure for a reason, in my opinion. So there you go. Moving on, I thought we'd have a look at a few volumes of new writings in hardcover, and I have started to collect new writings with a bit more seriousness recently. And I think that comes from hanging out with Jules, who's collecting them all as first paperbacks. I'm not so bothered. This is one I bought years and years and years ago. This is New Writings in SF13 in Dobson, and this dates from, let's have a look, this will be late 60s, 68, and it's a first, and it's in quite good nick. And I don't think I actually bought it new. I can't remember how I got it, but the main reason I bought it is it's got M. John Harrison in here, a story called The Macbeth Expiation. And I've got a feeling that's an uncollected one, because that's what I used to do. I'd look at bibliographies and try and pick up books by my favourite writers. And something I used to do a lot back in the day was when I would meet them, I would get them to sign odds. And there's Mike's signature there. And he probably signed this to me in the 90s. So that's an odd one to look out for. And it's just in really good nick. I really like these sort of very plain books. I like all sorts of books, really, but there you go. Then, of course, when John Ted Carnell died, round about 1970, the series was taken over in terms of the editorship by Kenneth Bulmer. And also the books moved over to Sidgwick in hardcover. And this is a Sidgwick. And as you can see, this is a little octavo. The previous ones are Demi. And look at that, brown, orange, white. It's got the Sidgwick SF on the back. Very, very nice indeed. And there's some great stuff in here. Harry Harrison, E.C. Tubb. And let's just have a look. I think this is the first issue after Carnell died. I think Bulmer did 22 to 30, and number 30 is really rare. And again, I think the main reason I bought this one was that it's got The Inverted World by Christopher Priest. Now, of course, in the USA, the novel Inverted World was entitled originally The Inverted World on early editions, but that was the wrong title. The correct title is a UK title, which was just Inverted World. What does it matter, you say? Well, it matters because the original version in here, as you see that's signed by Chris there, was called The Inverted World, and it's quite different, and it's well worth picking up. So if you can get hold of this, do. I don't think it's in any of his Grim things. I must have a look at that and try and put a comment underneath this video if I actually post this video. And yeah, so again, the lovely SF. I do like Sidgwick, so I've been trying to pick these up. They're usually in a state. I've had those for years, but I picked up a few in the last year and a half, including this one. This is number 23, so that was the next edition there. And again, we've got the lovely Sidgwick SF on the back and their colophon there. Let's have a look. There's a Keith Roberts story in here. Let's see. Yeah, who else is in here? Aldis, David S. Garnett, Barrington Bailey, Seed of Evil. Now, the book entitled Seed of Evil, I think was originally, the actual story or variant of it was in an ace double. I may be wrong here. I'm going from memory. And then there was a collection called Seed of Evil, and that's really hard to get. There was an Alison Busby hardcover, and I think there's one on the internet on sale in the States, and it's like really, really expensive, so it's not happening. So I've got that in there, and I don't think I've read any of these yet, so that's a bit of a treat. And that's not in bad nick. It's got a bit of a ding at the base of the spine there, but I've seen worse. So very, very nice. And the old Sidgwick SF again. As you see, I do like my Sidgwick SF. More recently, I picked up this one, New Writings in SF26. I love these simple, primitive, lurid covers. And this has got a Chris Priest in it. It's got Men of Good Value, which I think I've read. I think I've got in another collection. I can't. It must be one of the Grim Grin ones. There's other stuff as well. And there's a Ramsey Campbell, which I know I've read somewhere else, and it's got To the Pump Room with Jane by Ian Watson, which is a science fiction story set in Bath, where I live, an alternate Bath, where there's a kind of drought, and it's sort of Jane Austen type sort of era as well. I think Jane Austen's in it. It's a great story. It's in The Very Slow Time Machine, which was the first of his collections I read a long time ago. And there goes my watch zipping off in the background. As you can see, the standards of professionalism here continue to remain high, and they will go on and on and on. And I will keep talking until the damn thing stops, but it's probably not going to. But anyway, very, very pretty. So I guess that sort of technology sort of taking me down, really. Bit of spine fade, but you know, it's still lovely. I think this is the most recent one I acquired. And I really would like a whole set of these, but as I say, they're really hard to come by and usually terrible nick. And this is New Writings in SF 27? 27? Good grief. 27. It's one of the late ones. Have I got that in paperback as well? No, I haven't, because I try and keep a list. Because I am thinking of getting the lot, but I'm not going to duplicate formats. You know, it is what it is. And who's in this? Well, all this seems to be nearly everyone. Graham Charnock, who I like, a new wave figure. And Michael G. Coney. I haven't read any of these yet. It's possible some of them have popped up in collections and stuff. The old SF on the back. Yeah, really nice. So I would, you know, I dream of sort of like on a hay or something coming across a stash of these pristine, like, you know, in you know, still wrapped up and stuff. That would be lovely. So I'm not going to look at the new wave anthologies because we're going to cover those in the new wave video we've got coming up. So we'll have a look at a few other things. This is Vortex, a pan-anthology of new Soviet SF. And there's 7 stories in here. One is by the Strugatsky brothers. And I've read some of this. I've had it for years and years and years. Let me see. It was published by McGibbon and Key in hardcover in 1970. Wow, and this is a 1971 pan. And I think this is fairly uncommon now. And really nice because, of course, you know, we think ourselves of being into the Strugatskys and Lem, Behind the Iron Curtain, those guys. And, you know, this is just shows there was a lot of interest back in those times as well, which is great. I've got all this space here I made, which I may have shown you earlier in the video. So New Writings. Well, I've got quite a stash of new writings coming together in paperback. And I say it's Jules Burt's fault because, you know, he sort of decided to collect them. So I've got a pile of them there. You can't see them. I've just moved them out of the way. And I think most of these things are things I've shown you recently from recent Zardos hauls. One I'm going to show you, actually. Silverberg, of course, did loads of anthologies. And this is a nice one. This is, you know, this is really good. It's got three interesting writers in it. Keith Roberts. There's the original short version of Molly Zero in here, which only takes you a little way into the book. So it's really sort of like the first half of the book, 60 pages. There's a James Gunn and there's a Jack Vance, 3 very different writers, but Fontana, really beautiful. The Triax is fairly easy to pick up. I would say if you're struggling to find Molly Zero, pick this up because you get the first half of it and then it'll whet your appetite. It's great stuff. So there we go. The others here are all things which I bought fairly recently from Zardos. So we'll dig to the back. This is something which you never see in good nick. This is Michael Moorcock's England Invaded from Star, W.H. Allen. There's a hardcover out there. It's fairly dreadful. And I do like that cover. And mine's got a rather rippled spine. I've had this for all eternity. And again, this is sort of like the Radium Age stuff. This is early things. And I've actually annotated this, which is really naughty, on the title page with the dates of the stories. Because this, I think I got this, so I was looking at this, consulting this, when I was putting together an anthology with my mate Nick Renison for No Exit Press, which was going to be a kind of Rivals of H.G. Wells thing. And it was an anthology which got cancelled because of the financial crash. And I don't know if I've told this story, I think I might have, but I'll tell it again anyway for anybody who's not seen it. But Nick and I were putting together this anthology for No Exit, which was going to be all sort of British SF from sort of, before about 1925. It's all stuff out of copyright. And basically what happened was that No Exit had commissioned it. They hadn't paid us. We'd started to bring it together. And then the financial crash had happened, and the Works, who are like a remainder bookshop and sort of stationery bargain store, they briefly went to the wall. They didn't quite go into receivership, but they hit the wall, and they cancelled their order for the book because they'd ordered a third of the planned print run. And the fact that they were buying a third of the planned print run, and would have gone out as a bargain book, meant we would have been into profit instantly, and we'd been into royalties, which would have been great, but it didn't happen. So we abandoned the project. But I looked at the stuff in here, and there's all sorts of weird things in here. Tristram Crutchley, Professor Blyde Mudder Snook. They're all from between 1900 and 1913, basically. And the most famous thing in here is When William Came by H.H. Munro, Saki, which is Kaiser Bill. It's about sort of German invasion of the UK, 1913, sort of just before the war got going, really. This is the Great War, of course. So that was an interesting one. I do like anthologies, and I guess when I go to Hay next, I'll try and pick up some more, because they are starting to vanish, and I've got a real fondness for them. This is a great little series, Science Fiction Hall of Fame. This is volume 2. I only buy these things if they're in really good nick, generally these days, and it's sometimes hard to find them. And this is a Silverberg again, and gosh, you look in this, and there's some fantastic stuff in this. Judith Merrill, Cordwainer Smith, Scanners Live in Vain, Ray Bradbury, Cornbluth, Richard Matheson's Born of Man and Woman, which is just brilliant. I love Richard Matheson. I think Criminali did a video recently about Richard Matheson, and I thought, gosh, he's beaten me to it, because he does good stuff, actually. I do really, really like Matheson. He's brilliant. Fritz Lieber, Anthony Butcher, and I bought a nest for Butcher recently. James Blish's Surface Tension. A lot of people, I know Matt at Bookpulled is into James Blish these days. He hasn't read The Seedling Stars yet, and one of the key stories in that is Surface Tension, which is a brilliant pan-trippy story. Arthur C. Clarke's 9 Billion Names of God, another classic. Jerome Bixby's It's a Good Life, which is just brilliant, brilliant. Oh God, this is an amazing book. There's such seminal stuff in here. The Cold Equations by Tom Godwin. Bester, The Country of the Kind by Damon Knight. The short versions of Flowers for Algernon, and there's a Rose for Ecclesiastes. This is really quite something. If you ever see this, pick it up. These are really important stories. I'm just impressed. I've forgotten how good this anthology was. One of the best ones out there. So if you see it, snap it up. Don't worry about the condition. I know I go on about it, but it really is quite something. If we're talking sort of classic stuff again, one to watch out for, there's this series, The Astounding Analog Reader, by Harrison and all this. This is book 1. I think there's a few of these. I think there's 4 or 5. I may be wrong. And this is all stuff which was in, Campbell's Astounding, and includes Don A. Stewart's Forgetfulness, which of course Don A. Stewart was John W. Campbell. Farewell to the Master by Harry Bates, which was later filmed as The Day the Earth Stood Still. It's quite different. Really good. There's people like Ross Rocklin and P. Shirley Amelia who are really important then. It's got Asimov's Nightfall, a really key story. These are sort of things which, they're the foundation stones of sort of genre SF and the sort of golden age stuff. It's got Anson MacDonald's By His Bootstraps. Anson MacDonald is, of course, Robert A. Heinlein. So it's just great stuff. So that's another good one to watch out for. So if you're trying to get sort of classic stories under your belt from the golden age and after, those sort of things to look for. This is a nice one. Used to see this everywhere. Sense of Wonder, with novellas by Wyndham, Williamson and Murray Leinster. And the Wyndham in this, I think, is Exiles on Asperus. Yeah, which I think is a really great story. I think it's probably Wyndham's most important early story, I think. And to me, it prefigures elements of Childhood's End. I think it's really, really quite important. So I like Bruce Pennington cover. Isn't that lovely? And this used to be very common. I only bought it fairly recently because, it's one of those things you just never get round to. I got round to it at last. So there we go. Another one, the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. This is The Best from Fantasy and Science Fiction, volume 13, edited by Avram Davidson. And there's some great stuff in this. Again, this is a fairly recent purchase. There's Ballard, Vance, Harrison, Richard McKenna, you know, Alfred Bester, Avram Davidson, Ray Nelson. Ray Nelson's 8 o'clock in the morning, aka They Live, is in here, and it's worth buying for that alone. Not that the other stuff isn't great. I mean, it's got one of my favourite Besters in here, which is They Don't Make Life Like They Used to. And at this point, Bester wasn't writing much SF. I think by this point he was editing Holiday magazine. This is mid to late 60s. And he wrote a lot of non-fiction for this, critiquing how, you know, most SF wasn't very well written. So that's a good one to pick up as well if you want to. Another series you see now and again, Year's Best Science Fiction. There's been lots of different versions. This Adore one. This is the one that Aldous and Harrison did. This volume is particularly common. You see it everywhere. I don't know why. But there's great names in it. Sheckley, Dish, Silverberg, R.A. Lafferty, Gene Wolfe. You know, it's just great stuff. You know, really, really is. And you have a look what stories are in here. And it's got Rollerball Murder by William Harrison, filmed as Rollerball, which is one of the best SF short stories I've ever read. Really, really good. There's even a Max Beerbohm in here. Yeah, this is really quite something. Great stuff. So this is a common one. You can pick that up almost anywhere. Then you get things like the Nebula Award stories. I'm aware these are all sort of like not contemporary anthologies, but that's not the point. You know, you just go into any bookshop and buy them. So Nebula Award, these are worth looking at. They usually have, you know, shortlisted stories, winners, what have you. And like on this one here, you see there's two symbols there. The symbols are the winners and the categories. So there's a Sturgeon and a Lieber, Joanna Russ, The Island of Dr. Death, and other stories by Gene Wolfe. Great stuff, really, really good stuff, sophisticated material. Here's another one, which is volume 10. Again, I tend to buy these based on the contents and what condition they're in. I have had other ones I've let go. So let's see who's in this. This one doesn't seem to have a proper index, which is really annoying. Yes, it does. Zelazny, it's got If the Stars Are Gods by Eklund and Benford. Great stuff. I mean, there's a full-length book with that title, but the original novella, which won the Nebula, is the best one. So if you just get that, the other parts are okay. It's really good. It's got aliens like giraffes in this huge cavernous spaceship. And I really like If the Stars Are Gods. It's fantastic. Tom Reamy, who's really good. It's got After King Kong Fell by Philip Jose Farmer, which is a great fun Will Newton story. Lagan, Charles L. Grant, and the very wonderful Born with the Dead by Robert Silverberg. Yeah, great stuff. You know, these are good ways of cherry picking the best things out there. We've got a bit of non-fiction here as well, tucked in here. If you ever see this, Explorations of the Marvellous, Fontana, edited by Peter Nichols, great essays about SF. Lovely cover, love that, pick that up. It had a different title in hardback. Was it called Science Fiction at Large, I think? Let's have a look. Was it Science Fiction at Large? Science Fiction at Large and Golax, but Explorations of the Marvellous, much better title. Then you've got Hell's Cartographers, which are autobiographical pieces by Bester, Knight, Pohl, Silverberg, Harrison and Aldous. And the Robert Silverberg one is just one of my favourite pieces of non-fiction. If you want to read about a writer's career, I mean, the other ones are okay, but the Silverberg one, oh man, it's so good. This is a common book, Study of Asimov's SF, by Joseph F. Petrush Jr. I didn't find it very convincing myself, but it's a nice book, you know, so you hang on to it. It is what it is. Right, so we'll just pop this back in there. And actually at the end here, and I've got some space for other anthologies, this is fairly common as well. The Best from New Writings in SF, selection from volumes 1 to 4. So that's a good way. And it's a really nice book, actually. It's Corgi, really, really great. So that's sort of taking the best from the first 3 volumes of New Writings in SF. And there is some great stuff in here. Joseph Green, William Tenn, Aldous, a few unusual names. So yeah, so really, really nice book. I love that cover. Yeah, great stuff. You can pick that up. And talking about new writing. So we'll just flash some of the covers. I'm going to work backwards. Am I going to work backwards? I think I am. Number 29. Got this quite recently. I say most of these I've got recently. Number 30 is the hardest to get. Number 28. 25. 24. Now remember, I've got hardcovers which fill some of the gaps here. 19. You know, and some of these are quite scarce now. 18, and I am a condition nut, as you know, so we do what we can. 17. 16 is kind of the period charm as much as anything else. 15, I've had this for ages and ages. Some of them I've had for years, but I've picked up more recently because I've sort of got the bug from that Jules Burt fella, you know, so there we go. 14. 12. So it's the ones from the first 11 I'm short of, and as I say, when we get to I think the first 6 or so were reprinted, and these are reprints, and Jules wouldn't go for reprints, but I actually prefer these late 60s, early 70s covers. I think they're much nicer. So, but that's me, you know, that's my jam. I tend to go for that sort of period, you know, about 1970 to 1990 is my sort of thing with the old A format. I don't buy a lot of sort of liveries from before that, so I guess I'm not a true vintage paperback collector. I don't consider the 70s vintage. I consider it sort of modern, but there you go. Right, what else have we got? So let's have a look. There are some things you've seen recently, so I'm not going to show you them. They will have some new wave ones. This is a nice set. I've had these for years. This is Harry Harrison, the Nova series. He did 4 of these. They're not too difficult to get. There's some great stuff in them. Silverberg, Malmsberg, Aldis. Aldis is in everything, isn't he? Gene Wolfe, David Gerald, and there are some real odds in these. And you know, I look inside and I paid £1 for this. Great stuff. Naomi Mitchison, James Sallis. There's a story by Donald E. Westlake, aka Richard Stark, the crime writer, one of his SF stories. I love his stuff. He's great. And here's number 2. These are Sphere from the early 70s. Absolutely lovely little set. And it wasn't too difficult to assemble these. I bought them probably 15, 20 years ago. Frank M. Robinson is in here, the guy who co-wrote Glass Inferno, one of the 2 books on which the Towering Inferno is based. Farmer, Silverberg, Malmsberg, you know, these great names. Damon Knight, Naomi Mitchison again, Ed Bryant. Gosh, there's all sorts of great stuff in here. Harry Harrison, great editor. I probably prefer him as an editor to his own work, though I do love Make Room, Make Room. Here's Nova 3. Such great jackets, these, and they mostly got good spines as well. What's in here? Sheckley, Aldis again, Malmsberg again, David R. Bunch. If you've never read Modoram, that's a cracker. Mac Reynolds, more Naomi Mitchison. She's pretty much in every volume of this. Spinrad, there's some unusual names. There's the wonderful Sketches Among the Ruins of My Mind by Philip Jose Farmer. And finally, this is volume 4, ran for 4 volumes. Great sort of little series there. And it does make you think about going on. This is signed as well. Look at that. Signed by Harry Harrison. Fantastic. And what have we got? Kit Reed, Gerard Giannatasio, which is A.A. Atanasio, of course. More Malmsberg, Sheckley. They're in every volume pretty much. There's a non-fiction piece by Alfred Bester, which is really good. Naomi Mitchison is in every single volume. There's a Tom Reamy in here. Great stuff. So these sort of tread the sort of line between traditional genre and new wave. So they're a really good little series. So that's the Nova series, worth watching out for. What else do we have? I think all of those you've seen recently, so I'm going to pop them out. And I think that's probably pretty much it. I mean, the rest of them we'll talk about when I do a new wave video, and that is coming soon. I'll just flash these door ones if you haven't seen them. So there's a bit of anthology action for you, and I do like anthologies, and I will be getting more. But I've got a Hay in a few weeks, I'm going for 2 nights. I'm not planning to do a massive haul there, quite honestly, because I've spent so much money on books in the last year, and I've got other things I've got to sort of deal with. But I'm going to look up some anthologies. So this is Outlaw Bookseller. It's a bit of anthology action. I do have some more somewhere. We'll cover them another time, the B format ones, what have you. In my shelf talkers, I haven't really covered B format very much, and there's a load of B formats up there. But I have a novel way that I'm going to do it, but that's not going to be till March, because my B formats are basically piled up. They're not on the shelf, so we'll come to that. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, super thanks if you desire, all that stuff, and goodbye for now.